I would like to add someone to our group here. Professor Paul Weiss, a Sterling Professor of Philosophy at Yale. And I guess I don't, yes, I do have a copy of the book that he recently wrote with his son. It's the one you may have read about in Time magazine called Right and Wrong. It's a dialogue between father and son. His son is here and will be out later. He's a lawyer. And Mr. Weiss is, did I mention this? Sterling Professor of Philosophy at Yale. You've seen him on the show possibly before. He's the most interesting teacher I had at Yale because he didn't lecture. The class was fluid. He answers questions as they're fired at him. And I'd like him to meet you, if you haven't met him yet, and to meet Mr. Baldwin and Phyllis Newman. And here's Dr. Paul Weiss. Were you able to listen to the show backstage?
I heard a good deal of it, but then I was behind the rostrum here.
Yes.
So I heard only some of it.
Did you hear anything that you disagreed with?
I disagreed with a great deal of it. Mm-hmm. I am one of Mr. Baldwin's admirers. I've written him fan letters, and of course, there's a good deal I agree with. But I think he's overlooking one very important matter, I think. Each one of us, I think, is terribly alone. He lives his own individual life. He has all kinds of obstacles in the way of religion or color or size or shape or lack of ability, and the problem is to become a man. For each one of us, I think all this talk about poverty, race, prejudice is important, vital, but it's not really at the center. It deals only with the means in the way, or the obstacles in the way of becoming something much more serious and important. That is, to be someone in yourself. To become a man is a difficult job. It takes a lifetime.
I don't disagree with that at all.
I didn't think you would.
But I take that for granted. I really do.
That, you see, but by taking it for granted, you emphasize always the obstacles in the way, and perhaps you have it in mind, but I think your hearers very often forget that you have another objective in view, the one we both agree upon.
Is what I'm talking about.
And I thought Dick was asking that question before when he asked you, aren't you being more extreme? Isn't there some other end? Is it all hopeless? In one sense, it is not hopeless. In another sense, it is. It's hopeless in the sense that nobody ever attains the state of being a full man. But it's not hopeless in the sense that every one of us has a problem which he can resolve more or less within himself. These obstacles are terrible, I agree with you. But they're not insuperable if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, but what I was discussing was not that problem, really. I was discussing the difficulties, the obstacles, the very real danger of death thrown up by this society when a black man attempts to become a man.
Yes, but there's another important connection with that, and I suppose you do agree. All this emphasis upon black man and white does emphasize something which is here, but it emphasizes it or perhaps exaggerates it, and therefore makes us put people together in groups which they ought not to be in. I have more in common with a black scholar than I have with a white man who's against scholarship. And you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or on religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'm not talking about that. I understand that.
I know you're not.
I understand that. But as we sit here now, by the will of the people, a man named Ronald Reagan governs California. And the terms I'm using, you must understand, are not the terms that I myself might choose. I'm not interested in whether a person is white or black or green or yellow, but I'm talking about the force of the state which at this moment is oppressing black people all over this nation.
Not all.
The force of the state which is oppressing every black man in this nation.
You write freely, don't you not? Is black getting in your way as being a writer, an author?
Yes.
It is. Tell us how. I'd like to know how being black gets in the way of your being an author.
In the first place, now you put me a little bit on the spot.
I
don't like to discuss myself or my work.
All right, let's not talk about you. Let's talk about some other black author or white author.
No, let's not do it that way. I'll tell you what I mean. I'll use myself. Let's go for broke. It is the first difficulty then is to, and you will say this is true for everybody, but I unlike you, all right? In the first place, I have to deal with the fact that my history, my history, is inaccessible to me. That my history in this country begins with the bill of sale.
Your individual history?
My name is Baldwin.
Yes.
It's an old
I
English
understand
name.
that. My name is Weiss, and it's been derived from somebody else. Maybe my great ancestor was white-haired or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, but you have at least the Psalms of David.
I don't have them. I don't think I've read them in 10 years.
That doesn't matter.
Or 20. I couldn't tell you one of them.
That doesn't matter.
Doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. One's got to face this fact. Let us say we're both black, right? We both get here at the same time, right? You come from one tribe, I come from another. You speak one language, I speak another. We cannot talk to each other. We don't know what is happening to us. We're confronting a white man with a Bible and a gun and a cross. And what you have to do, if you're going to live, is accept this stranger, this book you cannot yet read, under the gun. Wait a moment. You asked me a question, I'll do my best to answer it.
Yes, but you must give me a chance to say something,
Yeah,
too.
but one moment,
All right.
one moment. I will, I really will. I'm not trying to.
Can I do something even more unforgivable because due to the mechanics, if we don't pause now, we may not be back for a while. So we will, and then we'll be back. Stay with me. Gentlemen, where were we?
I was in the middle of the Psalms of David.
Yes.
Right?
It's attributed to me somehow.
But I was trying to make a point. The point is this simply: that one began here with a history of an identity, not only inaccessible, but also systematically and deliberately denied and destroyed. The Moynihan Report talks about the breakup of the Negro family, and it occurs to me as a very bitter kind of comment on the people who did their best to break up that family. Now to blame the family for being broken up, and to suggest
He wasn't doing that. The report I read. Okay.
well, there are no male father images for the Negro child. Big news.
But he was trying to
describe
describe
in the first place, that's not as true as Moynihan would like to think. Otherwise, there would be none of us here at all. The point is that then, we come back to where I was. One has to really excavate out of the absence of a history, and then out of the presence of a history which is absolutely indescribable. You must remember that I was taught, and black children until today are being taught, that no black people ever contributed anything to history, that I was not much better than an ape, and I was lucky to be discovered in Africa by white people.
Mr. Baldwin, but if your case were carried out all the way through the way you're putting it, it'd be hard to understand how you ever wrote a word. After all, you're a distinguished novelist. You must have had time of freedom. Somebody must have paid attention to it. You must have been reviewed objectively as an author, not as a Negro. Nobody gave a damn whether your great ancestor had been born or sold, but they treated your literature or your work in its own terms. That's where you wanted it. That's where you had it. That's where you're having it now. What are you criticizing? What are you objecting to? That there are terrible injustices, everyone admits. But you're generalizing and you're rigidifying, and you're solidifying it in such a way as if there's no way out. You're an exhibition of the fact there's a way out.
Am I?
Yes. You yourself admitted. You're not just the incarnation of blackness. You're an author. That's why I think of you.
I beg your pardon. I am also the oldest of 9 children, all of whom are black. I am one of the few survivors of my generation, all of whom the people I'm speaking of are black. For every Jimmy Baldwin or Sammy Davis or Harry Belafonte or Sidney Poitier, there are a whole lot of people you never heard of, at least equally talented, perhaps more talented, who did not manage. I'll tell you how one makes it in this country if you're black. You have to decide somehow that you are not going to be controlled by what white people think of you.
Of course. What anybody thinks of you, ultimately you have to think of yourself and be true to yourself.
I don't care what Senator Eastland thinks about me.
Who cares?
Or Ronald Reagan thinks about me, but they have the power to destroy my life and the life of my